Good morning, everyone. My name is Constable Claude Chansey, Public Information Officer with the Winnipeg Police Service. Today's news conference will be focusing on an officer-involved incident which occurred the morning of February 13th in the 200 block of Magnus Avenue. Present with us today are Acting Chief Art Stannard and Community Engagement Superintendent Bonnie Emerson. They will be providing comment and are available to answer questions following the release. I would like to preempt today's press conference by issuing a warning that today's release contains information that may be disturbing to members of the public. On February 8th, 2024, the Winnipeg Police Service received an order under the Manitoba Mental Health Act to apprehend a 59-year-old male and convey him to hospital for a non-voluntary physician examination. Officers made several attempts during the following days to apprehend the male, but were met with negative results. On February 13th at 7:26 a.m., North District General Patrol officers attended the North End residence and were met at the door by the male exhibiting agitated behavior and in possession of a crowbar. As officers approached the male, he discharged a fire extinguisher in their direction before retreating and locking himself inside. Officers summoned the Tactical Support Team, TST, who upon arrival made repeated attempts to communicate with the agitated male, which were met with negative results. TST members breached and entered the residence and continued their attempts to communicate with the male, who had now barricaded himself in a second-story bedroom. The male again discharged a fire extinguisher at TST members. After some time, the male exited the bedroom and confronted officers while armed with a large edged weapon. During this encounter, officers discharged their firearms, striking the male. Officers provided immediate emergency medical care to the male with the application of chest seals and a tourniquet. The male was transported to hospital in critical condition and succumbed to his injuries. The Independent Investigation Unit of Manitoba, the IIU, has been notified and has assumed responsibility for the investigation. Please direct any follow-up inquiries to the IIU. I would now like to invite Acting Chief Art Stannard to the podium.
Good morning, and thank you for attending here today. Thank you. My name is Art Stannard. I'm Acting Chief of Police. Danny Smythe is away on business in Ottawa. So thank you for allowing me to speak today. It's very important to be here today. I need to offer some remarks on this tragic event. It is tragic. It's whenever a police interaction results in a death. No family wants to hear that their loved ones died during a police encounter. Nobody does. It's also tragic for the community as well. Like the family, they're asking questions, and they're asking questions why and what happened. Today, the service gave you a summary, but a brief summary of the events leading up to the use of force encounter. This information is limited because the incident is now in the hands of IIU. But we felt as a service, it was important to provide some information to you so you can get out to your readers and your listeners and try to put a little concept to it. That's all I have to say. I know this is going to be an open question, but I want to say just one more thing, please. I want to conclude by saying something about our members. No police officer or their families want to be involved in a lethal force encounter. Police officers take an oath to protect lives, and they take that oath very seriously. They respect the life. They want to help people. In this case, they were mandated by the Mental Health Act to take the male into custody and take him for a medical assessment. Support processes are in place to help the involved officers with their well-being as well. I'd like to turn over to Superintendent Emerson. Unless there's questions, or I don't know how you want to do this, ask me questions first, and then Superintendent Emerson, it's up to you.
I think we'll let Superintendent Emerson speak first, and we'll take questions afterwards.
Thank you so much for
Good morning. My name is Bonnie Emerson. I'm the Superintendent of Community Engagement with the Winnipeg Police Service. The first month and a half alone of 2024, the Winnipeg Police Service has responded to and provided updates on a significant number of serious and violent incidents occurring in Winnipeg. Events that our members are required, mandated to respond to. Just 2 days ago, we held a news conference and Chief Smythe shared a number of concerning events that members of the WPS were called to. Those were related to mental health, drugs, and has as all involved persons in crisis. In 2021, when we launched the ARC program, we noted that over the past 5 years, just under half of all police dispatch calls posed a medium to high risk to safety. The level of violence and the calls for service that police are required to respond to, mandated to respond to, are escalating. These include all call types, and it's important to note we don't often know what the risk to safety is until after we arrive. To provide some context, Chief Smythe noted the number of calls that we respond to under the well-being category. The well-being events continue to trend upward compared to previous years. It remains the top citizen-generated call for service that the Winnipeg Police Service responds to for the 4th year in a row. The WPS attended to 21,000 well-being checks. That's an average of 58 a day, an increase of 4% over 2022 and 16% higher than the 5-year average. Some of these may or may not involve calls involving mental health. Mental health can deeply impact people's well-being. Events are emotionally charged, and our members have limited information when they're responding. I think it's important to share some information on the Mental Health Act and some of the areas that require police response. To that end, I'll just try to do this quickly for you, but the Mental Health Act of Manitoba, it provides instruction and authorization for how individuals may be taken into custody and then taken promptly for an involuntary medical examination by a physician. The Mental Health Act, the MHA, governs the action members take when interacting with people who have a mental health issue. There's a number of sections and forms, and I'm just going to briefly touch on them, but I want to show the scope of the different types of involvement under the Mental Health Act that the police are required to respond to. Section 12 of the Mental Health Act authorizes the police to take a person into custody and then promptly to a place for an involuntary examination for a physician. There's a Form 2. You often have heard recently where police are responding to take a person involuntarily. A Form 2 is an order authorized by a justice to take a person into custody. It's usually obtained by a family member or a person who is concerned about the person's mental well-being. It can be obtained by any person, including a community worker. A Form 4 under the Mental Health Act is an application by a physician for involuntary psychiatric assessment. This is an application a physician applies for to the medical officer in charge of a psychiatric facility for the involuntary psychiatric assessment of a patient. There's a Form 14. That's a return to facility order. It's issued by the medical officer of a psychiatric facility when a patient goes absent without permission. There's also a Form 17. That's a cancellation of leave certificate. That's when a patient is allowed, certificate of leave allows a patient to reside outside a facility subject to certain conditions. A Form 17 is issued if the patient fails to comply with conditions or the mental health worsens. Section 12 and all of these forms I noted are limited to authorizing peace officers to take persons into custody. We're the only ones mandated to do this. And we cannot do this alone. Officers are human beings. They are required to make life and death decisions in high-stress situations and unknown risk. They do the best they can with the circumstances they're presented with and the training and equipment they've been given. We need to partner, we need to work, and we need to coordinate together with community and other partners involved in the social safety net to de-escalate situations before they require a police response, before the safety risk occurs. The WPS, to that end, has a number of initiatives that collaborate with partners, ARC, Thunderwing, the Gang Prevention Coordinator, which was one of our news conferences this week. Victim Services alone of the Winnipeg Police Service has reached out to over 6,000 victims of crime just last year. Many more contacts than that because they often engage on more than one time. And our Family Support and Resource Advocate, who has been present at past news conferences. Those are just to name a few. I want to thank you for all your time, and I'm open to questions.
So can you confirm if this was a Form 4 incident? Or a request, it was a request by a physician?
I can confirm this Form 2.
Is this a situation where ARC could be called in, or
I can clearly put that to rest. Based on the information we had, it was not a response to ARC at all. Absolutely not. The safety conditions and the information we had, it was definitely a police response.
Was it because it's outlined in the legislation, or that was a decision?
It was decision based on the information we had at the time about this person.
We've responded before about the calls for service that ARC is mandated to attend to because it's a civilian and a police partnership. Those are not appropriate for high risk or potential violent situations.
did this man live at that residence, or were other people present at the time, or was he alone? Able to say?
Well, anything to do with the investigation, because it's forwarded to IIU, we defer those questions for you to ask IIU.
He did live there though, correct?
Correct.
And are you able to give an address of where this happened?
200 block.
Sorry?
200 block of Magnus.
And again,
Yeah.
given that this is on another agency, I might not say, but I mean, from 7:26 a.m. when they first arrived, how long did this take? When did police shoot their weapons here?
I don't have that information. There was some dialogue with the male, and he was. I can't say much more than what was not said in the news release, but it was. I would say it was shortly after, but not right away after, but shortly after.
So minutes, hours, are you able to say?
I can't say. I'm sorry.
Can you tell us how often you get forms, any kind of form related to the mental health act?
Yeah, there's over 2,000 occurrences that were coded Mental Health Act related in our records management system. That's 6 calls a day. Out of that, 1,600 Mental Health Act forms were prescribed for use last year. That's on average 4 per day.
The 2,000, that's for last year?
2023.
Does
In-
this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Out of those numbers, the police were required to detain over 1,100 people last year under the mental health.
We are seeing increasing number of mental health orders and calls.
Can you tell us how that's changed? Like you said, it's increasing, but how has that changed from the year before?
So I don't have the 5-year average. When we're looking at When you look at our annual report, which is public, and you see the types of calls and the coded calls for violent property crime mental health act, we are seeing an increase in year-over-year averages.
Can you tell us if a form like this has been issued for this man before?
I think what we can tell you is that Winnipeg Police Service has a history with this male for mental health issues.
Suspect you won't elaborate more on that, but I mean.
I can't, it would be the IIU that would be doing that. You know, getting back to the question you asked about increase in forms and stuff, our members are seeing an increase of violence up there in regards to a whole bunch of different type of calls, including mental health, including family trouble, check the well-being, meth calls, addiction calls. There seems to be a common thread of either violence or weapons attached to those calls. And that seems to be becoming a common occurrence for our members.
Can you explain in general, maybe not necessarily for this case, but why a non-lethal weapon is used in one from one?
And you're right, I can't explain this one. It is an option that we could use. It's definitely based on the circumstances of every incident. I cannot speak on this one because the circumstances will be reviewed by IIU.
And it says in the release that officers discharge their firearms. Are you able to specify how many that would have been?
No, I can't. No, not right now. IIU will be handling that part of it.
Any more questions?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.